That's right. I'm back. Roll the
All of a sudden your legs are like, what's going on? What's going on? I got to recuperate. So that's not making excuses for real. I'm just saying these things. I don't know how true it is. This is just what a source told me. But if it is true, I could definitely see his legs not being there on fight night a week out. That's a little too much. But again, going back to the heat, for a fight after you weigh in, you can replenish yourself, but it takes another level to rejuvenate yourself. You can rehydrate, but the next step is to rejuvenate. You're leaving a little bit in the gym. I don't know if this is true, but a source told me that a week before the fight in Vegas, that Errol ran Mount Charleston for 5 miles. Now, Mount Charleston is high elevation. I don't know if you're familiar with Mount Charleston in Las Vegas.
Yeah, I've been there with Sean, actually.
Right. If you've never run hills before and you running a week out from a fight, if you never run like that in high elevation a week out, that's 3 or 4 or 5 days of recovery right there.
What up, Fight World? It's your boy Ego, and I'm back with some more boxing. God, I love my job. Listen, I made a video about SNAC founder Victor Conte and what he had to say, right? I put the video out yesterday. I'll put a card at the end of this video, so stay tuned to the end. If you haven't watched that video, click the card at the end of this video. Victor Conte, he gave his opinion of a grave mistake that Errol Spence made in fighting a SNAC fighter, Terence Crawford. And it had nothing to do with Terence Crawford, but more so the preparation from Team Spence. I made this video. It did like over 50,000 views in less than a day. Again, check that video out. And it's so funny because I let you listen to it. It was from an interview, and then I weighed in. I don't know what it is, but I know my role in this sport of boxing. The boy Ego, something about my voice, my opinion, it seems to matter so much to so many people, good or bad, right? Everybody cares what Boxing Ego gotta think and what Boxing Ego think. I gave you my honest opinion like I always do, and I'll continue to do on my channel. People blame me for what Terence Crawford's side said. Oh, Ego, come on. You're making excuses, Ego. Why does this have to do anything with me? I didn't make the video. I didn't do the interview, nor did I conduct the interview. So I could understand if I was the one maybe that interviewed Victor Conte of SNAC, and Victor Conte, I was like pushing him, because there's ways to lead in with your line of questioning to try to, pry and get some piece of information from the person and like steer them, if you will, like persuasive. It's just like persuasive writing, but there's a way to have persuasive interviews where you're kind of coaching them. This wasn't my interview. This wasn't my statement. I'm merely, a spectator who weighed in on what he said. And I believe that what he said was plausible. Again, you guys got to check out that video. But he said the big, extremely stupid mistake that Errol Spence made was to go into the Crawford fight a week before the fight, and he's running up Mount Charleston. He's like, why would you do that? You deplete yourself. There's a thing called altitude sickness. This is all provable, right? As you go higher and higher, like, why do you think people die when they're hiking up Mount Everest? It's rough. The terrain is rough. The air gets thinner, yada, 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 right? So this is what Victor Conte had to say, which makes a whole lot of sense to me, right? Some people, they blame me like, oh no, Ego, you're making excuses. And it's so funny to read some of the comments and read through them. They say, Ego, this is your fault. Ego, you're making excuses. But Terence Crawford's own team was the one that put out the interview. As I stated, I'm merely reacting to it. So how is it ego this, ego that, but Ego wasn't the one that initially said this? I'm just weighing in and reacting on what he said. And to me, it makes sense. Errol Spence. And here's the thing. One, it does not change anything. Errol Spence chose to run up a mountain. Nobody made Errol Spence run up Mount Charleston. Him and his team prepared in the best way that they knew how, and they decided that was part of due course to make the weight or to prepare for Crawford. It's no biggie. It doesn't change the results. So like usually, that's why it's funny in boxing when people say, oh, you're making excuses. Usually when someone makes an excuse, it's because they want to pacify something. They want it to something which would be deemed as failing. They want it, passable. Like, I'm late to work. Oh, it's because there was a car accident. I didn't turn in my essay, my homework. Oh, my dog ate my homework. Because you still want to turn in your paper. But for the people who are saying, oh, Ego, you're making excuses, it's just funny because nobody's trying to change the result. Fair play to Terence Crawford on a given night. His skills showed up, his training that he put in, it all came and it all, amounted into him getting a victory. Nobody's trying to change the result. And the funny thing is, I seem to be the voice of reason in boxing. Two things can be true. Just because I'm opening a dialogue and having a conversation, it's not a slight to somebody else. This is just a conversation piece that needs to be had. But what I'm not going to do on my channel is not open those lines of communication and have the dialogue that I want to have on my channel. That's just not going to happen. You guys have two choices. Get with it or get lost. Subscribe or unsubscribe. Those are your only options. I'm what counts out here in boxing. And this is a dialogue that needs to be had. But for me, I'm not going to not address the elephant in the room when I'm watching a fight and Errol Spence looks like a shell of himself. He looks like almost like a ghost, if you will. Like he just looks like a completely different fighter. And like, let's take it out of the realm of just boxing because a lot of people are sensitive about that. Let's take it out of boxing. So let's say Whitney Houston, we'll use a singer, right? Rest in peace to Whitney Houston. But if Whitney Houston was alive and you know her for having pipes, you know her ability to sing. She's a vocalist. She's a great, prolific singer, right? And then she has a chance to sing at the Super Bowl. Mind you, Whitney Houston killed it at the Super Bowl, the 90s Super Bowl that she sung at the halftime show. But let's say you heard Whitney Houston was going to be doing the Super Bowl and Whitney Houston, you were excited for it. And then when you finally seen her and she came out, it sounded like she had never sung a day in her life, right? She gets on the stage, gets on the mic, millions of people watching the Super Bowl. You were excited for her performance at the Super Bowl. And then again, it sounds like she's never belted out a tune. Naturally, I think somebody would look at that and be like, hey, maybe she was sick. Maybe something happened to her throat. Maybe she had some kind of accident because this is not the Whitney that I know, period. Right? That's the same thing. That's like people want me to not address the elephant in the room. I've watched all Whitney Houston concerts. I know she can sing. So if she got on the mic and then it sounds like her voice is just shot, is gone, like what happened? Did Ursula from The Little Mermaid reach down her throat? Like something is amiss. Period. And that's kind of what people seen with Errol Spence. When we look at the fight, it's not even that he lost because, again, we knew that was a possibility given the fact that it's a fight and given the fact that Crawford is an exceptional fighter. It's not that he lost, it's how he lost. Now, the clip you heard at the beginning was Virgil Hunter, completely separate And he's pretty much corroborated, and he actually did it. I never got around to making a video about it, but he actually said that before the Victor Conte recent interview. And Virgil Hunter said kind of more of the same of what we heard from Victor Conte. He says, I don't know how true it is, but I heard from a source that Errol Spence ran up Mount Charleston. And if you know anything about Mount Charleston, high elevation, and he says that's a foolish thing to do. Virgil Hunter also stated, and I'm just paraphrasing because you guys can watch the interview right here on YouTube. He says that's a big mistake. That alone, when you haven't been doing that, like if you're not accustomed to running in high elevation and then you just decided to just do that, he said that's at least 3, 4, 5 days of recovery on your legs, because that you're throwing your body into something that a gear that it's not even used to being in. And that's very taxing on the body, which is true. I mean, that's kind of common sense. Like if you know what it's like to climb a mountain, not run it, but just hike. I've hiked up mountains before, right? And if you know what that experience is like, it's very taxing on the body. Virgil Hunter also stated, he says he was going from 2 different climates. You got the humid Texas heat, and then all of a sudden you're in the dry desert of Las Vegas. I don't see how that switch, it's all about that switch. I don't see how that would be good for any fighter. So he's basically corroborating what Victor Conte would later say in terms of making a grave mistake. You're entering a fight and you're leaving everything kind of in the gym, which would also explain why Errol looked so flat. Not that he lost, but why he looked so flat versus Terence Crawford. Balance looked off, looked like he had no legs. This is a plausible, like if you can't see how this is plausible, then you might not even want to be on my channel, because we don't see eye to eye. We're just saying it's plausible, right? This was Errol Spence's worst night in his career. His legs look toast. This could be a reason. Again, some people, oh, you're making an excuse. It's not an excuse. Nobody's trying to change the verdict. Crawford was undisputed until they stripped him because he didn't fight Jaron Ennis. Errol lost his belts. It is what it is. Some people, even in the last video, they were leaving comments like, oh, this makes Errol Spence look bad. How does it look bad on Errol when he didn't even say this? This is just a dialogue and a discussion that we're having. This is what Terence Crawford's team said. It had little to nothing to do with Errol Spence. Derek James is not doing a bunch of interviews and saying this. Errol Spence. So again, you got emotional beta male fans, you cantankerous idiots, blaming ego and blaming Errol Spence. And Errol, he not even saying nothing. Last time I checked, he was on vacation with his girl, with his wifey. We just having a line of conversation about what went wrong. And if you don't like that, then you don't want to have boxing conversations, and that's good. Get off my channel. But to me, this makes sense. You're doing a serious weight cut. Errol already talked about he needed to move up to 154 and things of that nature. So you're likely dehydrated, stuck around the division. Like Virgil Hunter is saying, you were in 2 different heats, like 2 different, and I said that in my last video. Make sure you guys check that out. You're in 2 different climates. You're going from humid Texas heat, where, you know, the wind chill is making it feel even hotter than it is. And then you're going to a different style of heat in the Vegas desert. And then you're running up a mountain a week before the fight, trying to make sure you make weight or whatever the case is. You're probably depleting your body. Now, one thing Virgil Hunter said in his interview that I thought was really potent was he said, I watched basically the all accesses building up the fight. And he said, if you notice, he said, me personally, I've had camps with Andre Ward, obviously. And he says, I wouldn't have had him training in Texas in that Texas heat and then moved him to Vegas. He said, because if you watch the all access style show that they did, Spence Crawford, on those episodes, after each workout, he said, what did Errol Spence do? He said Errol Spence would plop down right in front of that fan, which let him know as a trainer that he's leaving it all in the gym and depleting himself and working himself to exhaustion. Again, this doesn't mean this is Terence Crawford's fault. You don't have to look after your opponent. It's not your job to make sure your opponent's good. This is the art of war. This is skullduggery. You are trying to hurt your opponent, which Crawford did. You're not there to be friends. You could be friends afterwards. So again, a lot of people, they don't like this conversation, but again, I'm not gonna not address the elephants in the room as I see it. That's never gonna happen on my channel. So everything that Virgil Hunter is saying to me sounds realistic, and Victor Conte, it sounds realistic. It's not taken away from Crawford. Crawford, he did his job. Virgil Hunter also said in this interview, he says, Crawford was training in Colorado Springs, Olympic Training Center. And he says out there this time of year, or the time of year in the summer where he went, it's not going to get any higher than mid to low 70s. Versus Errol Spence, you leave yourself susceptible to a vulnerable immune system, a lowered immune system, altitude sickness, switching from humid heat in Texas, which is ridiculous. I've been out there in different parts of Texas, to a desert, and Vegas is hot, but it's a dry heat. He said, I just don't see how this would be beneficial. And I agree. I concur. I think Victor Conte, as well as Virgil Hunter, they know about the sport and they know about training, one being a trainer, one being a guy who has supplements. And I don't think this did Errol Spence any favors. Doesn't change the outcome. It's not taking away credit from Crawford. And see, credit to Crawford. Crawford, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. He's been training in Colorado for like most of his fight camps. I know that. So he didn't change anything. It was Errol Spence. And sometimes you make these sudden changes and your body's not ready for it. And then you have to perform. You got 36 minutes to perform and you got to show up on that given night. So credit to Crawford. Errol Spence, he tried something, but now he has to do tweaks. But at the same time, he put himself at a deficit because of how the first fight went. Crawford definitely has a psychological edge. Check out the first video for more boxing news. Subscribe to the channel.